Hey, what's going on? Jeff Ratcliffe here. I don't think it's any secret that there's a lot of value at quarterback. Recently, over the last couple seasons, we've even seen quarterbacks going a lot later in home leagues. You know the type, you might even be in one, where quarterbacks used to fly off the board. You'd see 4, 5, 6 of them go in the first round. I don't even know if you'll see any this year, even in those kind of crazy types of leagues. And the reality is that in today's NFL, in 2019, there are far more quarterbacks who are producing big-time numbers than what we saw in years past. A decade ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, there just simply weren't this many quarterbacks who were throwing for 4,000-plus yards, who were throwing for 30-plus touchdowns. So the moral here for fantasy purposes is there's lots of value to be had. You can get away with waiting even in your home leagues at quarterback. But if you're going to do so, I recommend using what I call a safe and upside approach. It's simple. You balance out your roster with a safe quarterback and an upside quarterback. This allows you to at least compete with the safe guy. He may not be a league winner, but you can compete with the safe guy. Then you can swing for the fences with the upside guy, and you have that opportunity to potentially draft a league-winning guy like, Patrick Mahomes last year. So check out our other video on upside options. I'm going to give you 5 upside options in that video, but in this video, I want to break down 5 safe options who you likely can grab in the late rounds of your draft. So after about round 9 in a typical 12-team draft, or about round 10 in a 10-team draft, you can start to look at these guys. They may not all be there, but there's a good chance at least one and probably more than one of these guys will be available for you for a nice safe option. So let's start with Ben Roethlisberger. This guy was the number 3 fantasy quarterback last year. He quietly threw for over 5,000 yards, and we can't emphasize how important that is. There's only been 7 quarterbacks in history who have gone over 5,000 yards in a season, but of course he was overshadowed by Patrick Mahomes, finished as the number 3 fantasy quarterback, but of course he doesn't have Antonio Brown. Now, Juju Smith-Schuster, that's good. Deontay Johnson, Dante Moncrief, are any of these guys going to emerge for Ben? They're not going to fill AB's shoes, that's for sure. But that being said, Ben Roethlisberger's stock has fallen in fantasy, and you could easily get him potentially as the 11th, 12th, 13th quarterback off the board. Nice high floor, even without AB, a nice safe option to anchor your roster with. If not Ben, then how about the old faithful? It feels like every year, Phillip Rivers, you can get him as like the 11th or 12th quarterback off the board, and every year he puts up over 4,000 yards passing. In fact, 10 of the last 11 seasons, Rivers topped that number, and he's had at least 26 touchdown passes in each of those years. Now, the thing about him, no upside, just like Roethlisberger, not much mobility. The modern fantasy quarterback has mobility, and that's where the upside potentially comes from for fantasy purposes. Rivers, over the last 2 seasons, I kid you not, has 5 rushing yards. Not 5 per game, 5 freaking rushing yards. So he's not going to do much for you there, but we know a nice high floor when it comes to throwing the football. How about Kirk Cousins? Fantasy is a fickle game, and you might be led to believe that last year was a down year for Cousins, but the reality is this guy threw for over 4,000 yards for the 4th straight season. He topped 30 touchdown passes for the first time in his career, and he's widely being panned as a disappointment. Well, in that, there's an advantage for us for fantasy purposes because we can get him much later on than we very likely would have been able to. He has Adam Thielen. He has Stephon Diggs. He has Dalvin Cook out of the backfield. He has safety in Kyle Rudolph in the short and intermediate. And you're going to be able to get him as one of the last quarterbacks on draft day. That's a nice, safe option there with a discount on draft day for fantasy purposes. All right, how about Tom Brady? Yeah, he used to be an elite option. And I don't think this is the age thing, by the way. His numbers did decline last year, but we've seen the Patriots shift to a more run-heavy approach. They drafted Damian Harris this year to add to that backfield. Now, of course, they also drafted N'Keal Harry at wide receiver, so they're not completely abandoning the pass. This isn't going to be a Baltimore Ravens or Seattle Seahawks offense where they're crazy run-heavy, but they are going to be run-heavy. Plus, no Rob Gronkowski. That sort of hurts the overall value for Tom Brady, but he's still playing good football. He still has a nice high floor. He's a safe option. And now, unlike years past, you can get him after the first dozen quarterbacks go off the board. Finally, we'll round it out with maybe a guy who you might not expect to be safe, but how about Dak Prescott? We're completely overlooking the fact that Dak Prescott has had an extremely high floor over the last 3 seasons. 23 touchdown passes, 22 touchdown passes, 22 touchdown passes, 6 rushing scores in each of those seasons. Now, not an enormous ceiling, but a nice high floor, stability. Of course, he has Amari Cooper, which we saw those two had great chemistry down the stretch. The team is going to lean on Ezekiel Elliott, but the nice thing about Dak Prescott is his fantasy floor is raised up by that ability as a runner, and he's being widely overlooked. So there you have it, Big Ben, Kirk Cousins, Phillip Rivers, Tom Brady, and Dak Prescott as some safe late-round options who you can get in your fantasy drafts. Anchor it with a safe guy and then shoot for the moon with the upside guy. Like I said, go check out the other video if you want to see our 5 upside guys who you can get in the late rounds of 2019 fantasy football drafts. And if you want to check out all of our rankings and projections, make sure you go to profootballfocus.com.